Welcome to the Buck Stops Here, the official podcast of NotInHallOfFame.com, and I'm your host, The Buck, Kirk Buchner, owner, operator of this site, NotInHallOfFame.com, and its sister sites, the Fictitious Athlete Hall of Fame and the Fictitious Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Last week I had a chance to talk to Dangerous Danny Davis, the referee who turned wrestler and scored a huge win at WrestleMania 3. One of his opponents in that six-man tag was Tito Santana, who at that point had already established himself as one of the top names in pro wrestling. Former Intercontinental Champion, former Tag Team Champion, and he competed at the first 9 WrestleManias, and when the WWE Hall of Fame redid itself in 2004, he was a member of that class. I asked him about being part of that class, his induction, and some of the people that I thought he might sort of have some stories about, some people who probably should be joining him in that WWE Hall of Fame. Without further ado, here comes Tito Santana. Mr. Santana, it is a pleasure to talk to you. I've been a longtime fan. I've seen you compete many times at the Maple Leaf Gardens, Copps Coliseum, the Sky Dome at WrestleMania 6, and one time entering the ring as an announcer in Ottawa.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being a fan.
Well, it's not too often that I get to talk to you like one of the best wrestlers in the world. Not just in your time, just really ever. At one point, you were on top of the world, main eventing many matches against Greg Valentine. Challenging, actually, and a lot of people don't know this, prior to Hulk Hogan winning the world title, you had shots at the Iron Sheik. It could have been Tito Mania.
It could have been, yeah. It would have been nice.
But still, I mean, like with the Intercontinental run that you had with Greg Valentine, for me, that will always make you a legend in my mind and many others. And as we discussed before, I do a Hall of Fame show, so I've got to open up with, tell me who called you up for the induction of the 2004 Hall of Fame. That was the first time that it really sort of kicked into the modern era, because there were a few in the mid-90s, but this was the first on such a big stage. What did that mean being a part of that, and how did you learn about it?
Well, it was Howard Finkel that called me up, and I had gone to another Hall of Fame induction probably a couple of years, 2 or 3 years earlier, when they inducted Pedro Morales and Bobo Brazil in Baltimore, and it was just a real small thing. So I wasn't crazy about it, and I had left the WWE, and I never realized how big it got until I got to the hotel for WrestleMania in 2004 for WrestleMania. I believe it was WrestleMania 20, and you know, I realized how much, you know, the business had changed and how everything had grown and how big it was.
And you were with pretty much the first, and I always sort of like when I look back on it, the first core group of really the WrestleMania era, because it was yourself, Junkyard Dog, Jesse Ventura, Don Morocco, Bobby Heenan. That's got to feel special to be inducted with this group of your peers, doesn't it?
Yes, it was. I mean, I think Harley Race and I think
Harley, yes.
Slaughter was. I mean, there was 10 of us, and I mean, it was like, for the time, it was like the who's who of professional wrestling, and for me to be part of it, it was a big honor for me.
Shawn Michaels did your induction speech. Did you have any choice in that, or was that chosen for you?
No, I mean, I don't know who asked Shawn. I was totally surprised that it was Shawn Michaels who did that for me.
Because the two of you, I mean, you had a great match at WrestleMania 8, but the two of you don't necessarily seem to be associated with each other when you look in the annals of history.
Right. I mean, I had very few matches with him. We didn't hang around. I mean, you know, we weren't best of friends or you know, other than, you know, working acquaintances. You know, we didn't really have much to do with each other. I did give him a little bit of advice when him and Marty first came to the WWE, because they weren't doing much with them, and I said, look, you're here, you just be patient. You know, they got a plan for you. And you know, I would try to give everybody advice. You know, I wasn't. Maybe I should have been, but I wasn't I wasn't afraid for my position. I just felt that my work, was what kept me around, because at the time I was in the WWE longer than anybody else. So, I felt comfortable with my work.
And I would read often that there were many times that you wanted to leave, and Vince would just always want to keep you around. And looking back, I can certainly see why. Because even if you were to lose a few matches here and there, I mean, it's a former Intercontinental Champion when that meant a lot more than it does now. Former Tag Team Champion, and could be built up just like that with one match, and then beating Tito Santana meant something again.
Right. Yeah. I guess I had a value. When I was up and when I was putting guys over, to make other guys move up the ladder.
Mm-hmm. And one other question before we sort of go into some of the Hall of Fame people I'd like to see join you as part of that Hall of Fame class. One thing that I've always sort of wondered, and I'm kind of going off topic, but I've always been curious. You're from Texas, but you were always billed from Mexico. Why was that?
Because when I came to New York, Vince Sr. wanted to push me as a Hispanic, as a Mexican wrestler, and he wanted to there was a lot of Mexicans and Hispanics in general in this country, and like places like Los Angeles, Detroit, Chicago, there was millions of Hispanics in those areas, and they wanted to hit the Hispanic market, and for me to draw the Hispanic market. So he asked me to pick a town from Mexico, and I picked I just went on the map and I found Toluca, Mexico, and I kept getting announced from Tocula, and I would tell Howard Finkel it's Toluca, and he kept saying Tocula, and finally I gave up. I said, okay, it's Tocula. So people from Mexico would come and say, where's Tocula? Well, I've never heard of Tocula. I didn't know. I wasn't from there, so it was funny.
Did you just like say, oh, well, that one city? It's this little small hamlet near it.
Yeah, it was funny.
Nice. So I've got a few names that I'd like to bounce off you and just give your opinion if you think that they should be in the Hall of Fame, or just like whatever comes to mind. It doesn't really matter what it is, good, bad, indifferent. And these aren't necessarily the list of the order that they're currently ranked on our site at notinhallofame.com, because there's a few of them that are ranked, and they're going to be going in no matter what, names like The Undertaker, The Rock, but there are a few people that I'm more interested in who I think maybe need a little bit of a push, let's just say, to get in there. And the first one I want to bring up is one of your former tag team partners, actually the first person I ever interviewed for this website. That's Rick Martel.
It's beyond me why Rick Martel is not in the Hall of Fame yet. I just keep thinking that something went wrong with the relationship with the WWE. That's what I'm thinking, but it's just me. I don't have nobody else had told me that, because if something didn't go wrong, why is he not in there? I mean, there's a lot of guys that are in that, to me, we're not in the same level as Rick Martel. So if he's not in, hopefully he gets in, sooner than later, because he deserves to be in there.
No, absolutely. And you had that incredible feud, that great tag team with that. Just everything almost. I'm trying to think of a better executed turn from a tag team partner than when Rick turned on you at WrestleMania 5. And other than maybe the Rockers, I can't think of one.
Yeah, no, it was very good, and the people bought it, and I just think that we could have had a long feud. I was hoping we'd have a feud just like the one I had with Greg the Hammer Valentine, because Greg and I, we headlined every major city, and, including Madison Square Garden, and we sold them out. And I felt that I had proven that I could draw the fans, and they cut it short. I was kind of disappointed when that happened.
No, I can certainly understand why. Another name, I don't know if you wrestled him or had that much contact with him, but it was a big name in the 90s, and unfortunately he's not with us anymore. And he had mentioned on his social media how much he wanted to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. That's Big Van Vader.
Van Vader, I saw him more when he was doing the independents. And so I was never around in the territory where he was at. So I know that he was a big name, a big main event heel for a while. And, I also know that he was having problems. I don't know. A lot of the guys ended up having problems because they started taking pain pills, and one thing led to another. So I heard that he was heavy on certain pain pills, and a lot of people don't realize that we in that era we had to wrestle when we were hurt, so it was easy for us to get prescriptions from the doctors because we would get examined pretty much every night, and that we were legitimately in pain, and the doctors would give us pain pills, and some of us abused them, and some of us didn't. And from what I understand, he was dependent on pain pills, and I think it affected his life and his career.
And it's such a shame because he was one of the best big men ever. And
for him to do that what do you call it?
Oh, the moonsault.
Somersault. The
oh,
moonsault
my God.
From the corner. God, over 300 pounds, and that was awesome.
Oh, very, very, very much was. And I know that, again, he wasn't necessarily someone you interacted with a lot, but in your era, and it's one that I felt really bad that it didn't get in, because knowing he was one of the few that he openly said how much he really wanted to be a part of that. Another two names, actually, I want to bring up to you, a little bit controversial, not mainly because of how they died, sort of you bring up pain pills. Two people that you teamed up with quite often in 1987, the British Bulldogs.
Well, the British Bulldogs, they were all, no secret, they were, fired, steroids. They built a great body. They took steroids, but they also would hit the gym pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of the guys started taking steroids because steroids would heal you quicker when you would get an injury.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is when you would start taking steroids for a long period of time, then it wouldn't work like it was supposed to work. Unfortunately, both of them, I know Davey Boy has passed, and I think even Dynamite passed.
Dynamite passed recently, yes.
He recently, I know he was in a wheelchair for a long time. He was, his health went, completely downhill real fast, and he moved back to down under, wherever he came from. I don't know where he was originally from. But,
England.
I believe that they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. They were part of the Bret Hart, the Canadian connection.
Mm-hmm.
God, they were over big time. When I left the WWE, and when Bret became the world champion, he came in a tough spot. It took Bret quite a while to get over. He wasn't drawing. The houses went down. And then I came back to do the commentating, and all of a sudden, the Canadians, and like Bret had his little gang in the WWE, they all got over like $1 million, including his brother. It was the Americans against the Canadians, and
yes.
The business was hot. And Dynamite and Davey Boy were part of it. I do believe that they might not get in there soon, but I have no idea what they choose to use to consider somebody going in. So it's okay for somebody to do drugs, and somebody else it's not okay. So who knows what the deal is.
The way I understand it, essentially it's whoever Vince wants to put in that particular year.
Right. But he's really not a good talent, I think.
Well, it's one of those things I sort of look at just as a fan. Vince, without Vince McMahon, I wonder if I would be talking to you right now. I don't know that because growing up in Toronto, the WWF in the mid '80s, I don't have to tell you how that exploded there, and along with a lot of my friends, that's what we were watching on a regular basis. Having said that, then there's a lot of things that he also brought that I can't say that I'm a big fan of either.
Well, because he looked at wrestling different than the old wrestling promoters.
Mm-hmm.
For him, it was more like TV. He took us to a completely different level. All of a sudden we became national heroes. The promoters, they were so worried about protecting the business and kayfabe and making people think that it was it was completely on the up and up. And Vince totally just went away from that. He came out and exposed the business, and called it family entertainment. And, he had a different mind. And, he knew where he was going, and look where he's at. He's a billionaire.
That is true. I've got a couple other names that one that I'm also very, very passionate about, and I don't think that person's ever going to get in, only because, again, we talk about how they passed away, and that is the person who helped make Randy Savage, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why Elizabeth didn't go in when Randy Savage went in. Maybe Randy had something to do with that, because it was a very bitter divorce.
Well, Randy had passed away when he was inducted, so both of them at that point were no longer with us. Because Randy...
Yeah, but I'm sure Randy had something to say, if it was ever going to happen. He didn't want her, anything to do with her. And I would, as jealous a person as he was, and the breakup. I mean, I was with Randy in Erie, Pennsylvania, when they served him with the divorce papers. I mean, the poor guy lost it.
Oh my God.
It was very hard on him because she had just gotten off the road. So Randy took it very hard. I don't think he ever recovered. He was in love with that girl.
Oh wow! So that would have been, I guess, right after they got kayfabe married on at SummerSlam.
Yeah, well, they had been married for about 10 years. That was a work.
Right. But
they had been together for quite a while.
Yeah, but then they had sort of the what was that? SummerSlam '91, Match Made in Heaven, Match Made in Hell.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, to me, one of the reasons Randy got over as big as he did was because of Elizabeth. She was a big part of him.
And it's such a unique character. Looking back with the women's evolution in pro wrestling, a character like Elizabeth, I don't know if that would necessarily work today, but back then, she was one of the top 5 over people in the company.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the way they dressed her up and the way she looked, she was beautiful. But now they have so many beautiful women around that she wouldn't even probably be on top of the list right now as far as beauty goes.
I don't know. Well, even if she was or wasn't, now fans are looking for women who can perform in the ring. Right.
Yeah. I mean, they're very athletic and they're beautiful and they have great bodies and it's a different. But she was never a wrestler. She was strictly a manager.
Well, I know Vince Russo tried to have her wrestle a couple times on Nitro.
I never knew about that, so I mean that's new to me.
Yeah, it's just as well. Not to bring up, sort of associated with Elizabeth is someone who, from when a lot of people talk about him, they talk about that he was a little pompous. Now you see interviews with him; he's the most humble, down-to-earth man on shoot interviews. Lex Luger.
That's another guy that when I met Lex Luger, I mean, he watched everything he ate. didn't drink alcohol. I never saw him drinking alcohol. He was always, really up with his diets. And then he left, and then all of a sudden, I hear that he's doing drugs and all messed up, and and to see where he ended up, ended up going to jail, and in a wheelchair. It's to me, that's one of the saddest things that I saw in our business. There's besides Lex Luger, there's a lot of other wrestlers that it's kind of sad to see where their health. We abused our bodies quite a bit, and not too many of the guys that are aging well. Everybody's limping around. Everybody's hurt. Everybody, something's wrong.
You can still go. I see that you can still do the flying forearm.
Yeah, but I didn't abuse my body. I wasn't out partying every night. I wasn't doing drugs. I just I didn't follow the pattern. I wasn't a follower.
Right, and that's, I think, and it's something also that I encourage everyone listening to this. There is this great piece that, if you haven't seen it, CBS Morning did on yourself a few years ago that I saw on YouTube about how you're a teacher teaching Spanish in New Jersey. Are you still doing that?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, I mean, and it's a great story. You put your kids through school. I mean, like, nowadays, some of the older wrestlers, they say, like, how everyone's not partying, they're all playing video games. Yeah, but they're keeping their money. And that's what you did. You had your priorities set.
Right.
Do you try, when you're working those independent dates, because I know you still do that in the Northeast, and I'm sure younger wrestlers sort of come up to you and asking for advice in the ring. Do you give them life advice also?
Yeah, I do. It's I give them advice, and I also give them advice that it's a very hard business. That very few are going to get the opportunity. And I also tell them, I said, look, if you're going to make it to the WWE, Vince is the boss. You're going to stand in front of him. He's going to look at you, and you're going to say, you got to ask yourself, am I a product that can help this company draw some money? You got to ask yourself that. A lot of guys think all they have to do is put on a pair of boots and tights, and they're going to get a break. You have to have something to offer. You got to go 100%. And then hope to get breaks in between.
Did it? I'm kind of going off topic from what I originally wanted to ask you, but this is sort of leading me to a few other questions. I hope this is okay. As I think I mentioned in our first conversation a few days ago, I became very good friends with the late Chavo Guerrero Sr., and I know that he did a few months of dark matches for the then-named WWF in 1987, but he mentioned to me he always worried that with the I guess I would want to say the racial climate then, they were content with just having one Hispanic who was over. Was there something to that, or because right now, I mean, there's so many Mexican wrestlers or other wrestlers of Hispanic heritage on not just their roster, but in AEW, and other organizations. Was that something you had to deal with, or?
I just worked. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in with the office. I wasn't talking to Vince on a daily basis, or anybody who was the matchmakers, Pat Patterson or George, the Booker before Pat Patterson. They brought in Mil Mascaras. I don't know if they brought him in to see if they could replace me, because I had been around for a while. They brought in Chavo, and obviously, they didn't keep him, but it was nothing. I never complained to nobody about, them bringing anybody in, mm-hmm. And I had no idea what their plan was. All I know is I just kept working hard, and they kept me, and they were gone.
Yeah, with Chavo, he did confide to me, and this is going to be in, hopefully his book will come out that I helped to write. His exit was sort of self-inflicted.
Yeah, I know that he also had demons
Yes.
with drugs, and he had trouble with that, but I don't like to talk about that.
No, of course not. And I think
to each their own.
Yeah. There's a few other names I want to get back to. One who I think, and it's almost talking about the changing times. One of the best bigger men I ever saw back then, and just how he could move carrying so much weight, was Adrian Adonis, and he was right up there. And one of the biggest matches at WrestleMania 3, the hair versus hair match with Roddy Piper, and when I look at him, his best work in the WWF was playing this, not the best stereotype that just does not age well. Is that something that you think could keep him out? Because if you want to show a highlight package, you're really reflecting sort of the worst part of what you were.
Yeah, I mean, again, Adrian he was one of the best heels around at the time, and he was a good talker, and he was a great worker, and again, like, I wasn't privy to a lot of what was going on. Back then we all thought it, and we would, I've heard a lot of wrestlers talk about, I was over, I drew, I did this, I did that. And then when I went in as a commentator, that I was part of the pregame stuff, putting the night together, and Vince McMahon telling us what to say, what everybody was going to be talking about. I realized, and I said, God, I had very little to do with me getting over it. It was every decision that Vince made that got me over. Every decision Vince made got Hulk Hogan over. They could have put anybody in our positions. So, who's to say what? I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah, I just think it's sort of hard with Adrian, just sort of with the flamboyant gay gimmick. It just ages so badly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and that's sort of that's how wrestling was back then. I don't know if it ever bothered you when Jesse Ventura used to sort of refer to you as Chico on commentary. I'm guessing you just figured that's how it was.
Yeah, well, I got back then. You could get away with that. I have a book coming out. It'll be, should be out probably in a couple of weeks. And the title of the book is "Don't Call Me Chico," and it's because of Jesse. Jesse was over so much, and he loved. They asked Jesse who he would wrestle if he had one guy to go up against. He would always say Tito Santana. Because we had great matches, and he was over so big that by him calling me Chico, it would get the fans pissed off, and it kind of helped me get over in reality.
Yeah, because I believe you defended your Intercontinental title against Jesse a few times. That probably would have gone longer had he not had, I think it was issues with his lungs.
I don't know if he had issues with his wife. I know that Jesse would disappear for days at a time. Also with problems.
Oh, okay.
He just. We'd go to San Francisco and we wouldn't see him for a couple of weeks, and so I couldn't tell you what the deal was. I couldn't tell you if it was drug problems or not, but I know that he'd be gone.
Yeah, I was under the impression that he had to become a full-time commentator just due to health reasons, but I mean, I could be mistaken. I've got a couple other names here that I want to sort of wrap up with. Two men who probably aren't going to get in anytime soon because they're involved in the concussion lawsuit. They're the duo who you dropped the tag team titles to at WrestleMania 4, Demolition.
Yeah, I think if you're in a lawsuit with Vince, I honestly don't see
probably not
into the Hall of Fame.
No.
But I mean, God, those guys were fantastic. They're good guys. I run into them. We do appearances together, and they just Bill Eadie is really the leader of the two. The experienced guy. He's a stand-up guy. He had his beliefs, and he just wasn't about to give in. To Vince. And people didn't stand up to Vince, and were around very long.
Mm-hmm. I've got two more names. They're non-wrestlers. One I believe you had quite a bit of interaction with. One I don't think you had any interaction with at all, but I'm very curious on your opinion on that. The first is, and he's gotten himself with a bit of hot water lately, one of my favorite managers of all time, Jim Cornette.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know Jim Cornette much. I mean, he got there after I left. And I would see him. He was a great talker, because I don't watch wrestling, but from time to time, if I was channel surfing and it was on, I'd watch him a little bit. But I knew of him, and I mean, from what I understand, he had a great mind. Not only was he a great manager, he was he was a booker at some point there in the WWE, matchmaker. I have no idea why all of a sudden he was gone. I mean, that's about all I can tell you. I just don't know that much about him other than what I saw from the outside.
Do you think he'd be a worthy addition to the Hall of Fame?
Probably. I mean, I don't know how many managers have been inducted into the Hall of Fame because I really don't keep up with it.
Right. So is there anyone you would personally want to see in, and is there someone you would want to induct if you were asked?
God. I couldn't think of anybody because, most of the guys that I knew are already in. And I can't think right off the bat. Is Butch Reed in the Hall of Fame already?
No, he's not.
I think Butch Reed, would definitely be somebody who'd be worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. I mean,
I agree.
God, he was over, in New York. He was a hard worker. He wasn't a problem. I personally think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, there's some names that I'm not going to mention any names, but there's some names in the Hall of Fame that I know for a fact, he deserves more than those names being in the Hall of Fame. But I don't think Vince can put all the good guys at one point. I think he has to save two or three, old names or really big new names, to make the Hall of Fame, valuable, to his organization. Because a lot of people, like to go to the Hall of Fame, almost as much as going to go watch WrestleMania.
A lot of people, yes.
Yeah.
There hasn't been, with the exception of Johnny Rods, a lot of, enhancement workers. Would a name like the Brooklyn Brawler, Steve Lombardi, be a good fit?
It's like when you're a Hall of Famer, it's like when you're a Hall of Famer in professional football.
Mm-hmm.
Is a guy that just made the practice squad should be a Hall of Famer because he worked hard and stuff.
Okay.
I think it's a different level. Steve Lombardi. I mean, God, what a career he had! But he a lot of times behind the scene. I know that he really helped the Ultimate Warrior, work, but he was at a different level. Do I believe that he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame? I can't say that I do. I can't say that he's
mm-hmm.
at the same level as Butch Reed. I can't say he's on the same level as Jake the Snake Roberts, or,
Right.
And Sergeant Slaughter.
Oh no. Well, and I can certainly see that. The other sort of one that I think about periodically, it's not one that I feel personally passionate about, but back in the 80s and then prior to that, far more than is prevalent today, the little people were wrestling. So what about someone like Sky Low?
Well, yeah, I think they should. I mean, I don't think they have any.
No, they don't.
Any little people in there, right?
They don't.
I mean, the fans used to love those guys. And those guys were great entertainers. They were almost as good as, at one point, I wouldn't say that they drew like Andre the Giant, but, a lot of people came to see the big guy. A lot of people came to see the little guys.
Well, there was something really for everyone. So thank you again so much for your time. We've pretty much gone over a lot of the names that I wanted to. There's one match I would love to ask you about, and I hope I don't think it's something that you get asked about a whole lot, because I'm sure that everyone sort of hits the big points, the feud with Valentine, the WrestleMania matches. There was a match that you had in New York City, Madison Square Garden, against Coco Beware, where Coco was wrestling as a heel.
Well, Coco was wrestling as a babyface.
Right, but against you at that particular match, he went heel.
At the time, you didn't see a lot of good guy matches.
Right.
And this was something that Coco chose himself. He said, Tito, I'm not going to get over you as a baby face. He said, so I'm going to do a little heel, stuff with you, and then when he did a little bit of heel stuff, the people really got pissed off at him and turned on him, really good right away, and they made a big difference on the match.
Mm-hmm.
Coco was a great worker. He was, because none of us, even though I get in the ring that much, there's no way that I'm going to attempt to do what I used to do in the ring when I was younger.
But I'm sure you can still do the figure four.
Yeah, I can still do the figure four. The flying forearm, not so much, because that flying forearm, every time you land, like my body, it's like a whiplash on my back, and it does affect my back every time I think it's been about 2 or 3 years since I've done it.
Do you still get invited to go to the Halls of Fame, or like?
No, we don't. I get invited to go to the Legends autograph sessions, but nothing to do with the WWE.
And just, I guess, one other thing here. So, Tito, you mentioned you've got a book coming out. Can people pre-order it?
Yeah, they can. They can go to TitoSantana.com, and I think all the information is there.
And I believe that was cool.
And if they pre-order before Christmas,
mm-hmm.
I'm going to make a phone call for them.
Oh, nice.
To them and thank them.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure for me. And if hopefully I can have you on again.
Oh, thank you. And you take care and don't suffer too much with the weather down there.
Yeah, for those listening, I have the pleasure of living in Barbados. It's, again, a rough life, but someone's got to do it.
Yeah, especially right now that we're just getting into the winter here in the East Coast. I'm jealous. I have to say that.
Well, you can always go to Takula.
Yeah, if I can find it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank